Look at that. Just perfect timing. So yeah, so this session is going to focus on job searching and finding our internship. We talked about resumes last month. We're going to talk about in the next month interviewing, and so this is the conversation about how you go out there and find your next job, your first full-time job, and internship over the summer to continue to grow professionally. So I'm going to kick it over to Chris, and Chris will introduce our first guest.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. All right. So for our opening segment with an AD this evening, we have my athletic director at Colorado, Rick George, here to speak with us a little bit tonight. Rick, appreciate you taking the time to talk to all these young up and coming marketers in the industry. To get us going, Rick, could you tell us just a little bit more about yourself and your career journey that led you to becoming the AD at the University of Colorado?
Yeah, I've been in this business, I'm going to date myself, but for a number of decades. And there's no industry that I would rather be in than an athletic industry, and particularly in college. And so I started out at the University of Illinois as a football recruiting coordinator. That was my first job. And then I had a defensive back coach that I played for by the name of Lloyd Carr, who recommended me to Bill McCartney. Bill was looking for a off-the-road recruiting coordinator. So I was fortunate to get that job and worked with him for 4 years, won a national championship in the 90 season. We played in the 91 Orange Bowl and won that. And then I left to go to Vanderbilt. I wanted to broaden my career. So there I did football operations and recruiting. Now there's departments of 20 or 30 that are doing that. And there were 2 of us at Vanderbilt that did that. And I was fortunate to be able to move up in that organization. Paul Houlihan was our AD, and I ended up leaving there as the external associate athletic director for external operations. And one thing I would tell you is don't lose your patience in where you are. But I did, and wanted to be an AD, and couldn't get to that seat, and decided to make a career change. And I went into the not-for-profit world, but I was still in athletics, running a PGA Tour event. And we had a lot of success there. I left that place, and I learned a lot there, because when you work for a not-for-profit that's focused on children's charity and PGA Tour golf, you really have a feel for how to budget, and everything that we saved and everything that we generated in revenue, the deficit went to children's charities. So we were really motivated to keep a tight budget. And I learned a lot about budgeting in that role. And then the commissioner of the tour asked if I would come meet with him. And so he sent his plane. I went to Ponte Vedra, and headquarters thought he wanted to give me a PGA Tour event to run. And he gave me a tour to run. I was the first president of the Champions Tour when we rebranded it from the Senior Tour to the Champions Tour. And I was the first president of that tour. I did that for 5 years. Then he asked me to run the PGA Tour. I was fortunate to do that. Also oversaw all of the championship managed event, the Players Championship, the President's Cup, and a few other events. And then I got a call from a good friend, Bob Bodine. If you don't know him, you should get to know him, who does executive searches. And he wanted to know if I'd be interested in going to the Texas Rangers. I said yes. I interviewed, I got the job, ran the business side of that organization for 3 years, went to 2 World Series in 2010 and 11. 12, we got beaten the play-in game, and then I left middle of the season in 2013 to take the role at Colorado, and really it was a role that I'd always wanted. It just took me a different path to get there. Again, I was fortunate to get this AD job, and now I'm finishing year 10, August 11th of this year. So that's my path, that's my journey, and my wife's been by my side the whole time. And I started in 1982, so 40 years in this industry, and been blessed and fortunate to be where I am.
So Rick, you've been, a lot of places, you've done a lot in your career. Can you tell this group a little bit more about how you got that first job in athletics, like how you really started to get your foot in the door to get your career started?
Yeah, look, my first role, I mean, I know you're talking about internships tonight. Those are really important. It separates you from other candidates that may be interested if they don't have that experience. I don't know if you'd call it an internship, but I was the assistant recruiting coordinator. And it was kind of a 9-month position that I started in 1982, right after I graduated. And I worked for a guy by the name of Gary Horton. A year later, I'm at my honeymoon and I get a call from the head coach and says, Gary is taking a job with the Tampa Bay Bucks. Would you like to be the full-time recruiting coordinator at the age of 23? So I raised my hand and said, yes, I'll do it. And, the rest is history. But, I was really fortunate, but again, I ran camps. I raised my hand whenever I could and wanted those opportunities. And, I would say to everybody on this call, you're young. A lot of you are young starting in this profession. It's all about relationships when it's said and done. And the people you meet along the way are going to help you. And what I would tell you as you're looking at internships and looking at different roles, make sure you have people that advocate for you, that can call people, because somebody knows somebody everywhere there's a job opening that you may know. And Bob Bodine wrote this book, The Power of Who. I would encourage you to read it. You can read it in 2 days, but it really talks about how your relationships help you with that next role in your life. And again, I had a lot of help along the way. I never got a job without somebody's help. And but the other thing is I never burned any bridges. I always left the place better than when I got there. And again, I'm fortunate to be sitting in this seat, but I started as a recruiting coordinator making $14,000 a year and decided to get married during that same time frame. And my wife said, well, how are we going to afford a wedding? I said, we'll figure it out. And we did. And just so happens on our honeymoon, we got a great gift, and that kind of propelled my career. And I left there to go to Colorado and Vanderbilt and other places in between.
Awesome. Rick, you kind of gave us some good advice there at the end of that question. Is there any, what's one piece of advice you would maybe tell your younger self if you could, right? Or is there anything you would maybe change about your career journey as it's played out over the years?
Look, I would say there's nothing I would change. Again, I've been very fortunate. I've had some incredible roles in my career. And what I would say, and my piece of advice would be, stay focused on your role and what you're doing in the athletic department. Don't worry about what others are doing in their role, because that doesn't matter. There's a fit for everybody, but stay focused, outwork everybody around you, do the things that anybody's asked to do. And I think today I still do that. I don't ask our staff to do anything that I wouldn't do. And I think that's really important. So if you get a call in your department, we need to lay shirts out on the bench, raise your hand, do it, because you're being noticed. And it's really important that you're part of the team and you understand what your role is. I would also tell you that raise your hand when opportunities come about. I did that. I was fortunate to do that. I had great counsel on that from people around me that said, we've got this role, you may want to look at it. And one thing that I've done throughout my career is I didn't pigeonhole myself into one thing that I was good at. I started in recruiting, that's sales. I did all of the external at Vanderbilt. I left the PGA Tour because I really wanted to focus on getting better with the budget. And when you're in Major League Baseball, the last thing you want to do is have a capital call with your owners because you didn't generate enough revenue. So we were really focused on the revenue piece of this. But it's important to broaden your resume, broaden your career. The internship piece is so important, because when you're sitting and your resume is in front of somebody, 2 things. One, if they hear from somebody that, you know, they're going to rise you up a little bit on that pack of resumes. And then if you have any experience in college or pro athletics that you can bring to the table, that you can say, I've also done that. Those two things are going to be really helpful for you. So for me, the other thing, the last thing that I'll say, and I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have, is that, you know, it's all about the work ethic, and it's all about, you know, doing everything that you can in your role to be successful. You know, this is a challenging industry today. It's only going to get more challenging, but it's a great industry when part of your job is to be at a game and put on an event to get people in the stadium and watch your student athletes succeed. It's really, really fun to do. And part of my job is I was just in Arizona for 4 days watching our men's and women's basketball tournament. And so again, stay focused on what you're doing. Make sure you have advocates that are going to help you along the way, and create your own network of people around you that will help you get to where you want to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick. I know one little anecdote for everyone on the call. Rick doesn't joke about the putting out the t-shirts. Last year, we had to put about 10,000 pom-poms out in the football stadium to get ready for one of our games. And I think Rick was the second person to answer my email calling for volunteers. And he was out there in shorts and a t-shirt with the rest of us laying pom-poms out in the student section. It's one of the things I've enjoyed about working, you know, with and for him. So Rick, thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate the advice. And yeah, again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Look, you all have a great call. Chris, I appreciate you inviting me on, and good luck to everybody. And we do have internships here, so reach out to Chris on those.
Thanks, Rick.
All right. Take care. Have a good meeting, everybody.
Awesome. Well, we are so thankful that Rick stopped in and was able to kind of connect with us, and hope you took some nuggets away. I know I sure did, so I'm excited. I am very excited, I know Gracia is as well, to get this conversation started. So again, we thank you all for joining us, and we will start with the introduction of our guest panelists. So I will ask both Katie and Chris. We'll start with Chris to kind of introduce yourself, name, title, where you currently are at, how long have you been in that role, what was your first taste of sports post-student? So that's kind of talking about our topic. And then one piece of advice you would give these folks on how to approach looking for a summer job. So Chris, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Nicole. I like that I'm wearing both hats tonight. I'm doing 15 minutes of hosting, and then I'm flipping to being panelist. Yeah, so Chris Shane, I'm the director of marketing at the University of Colorado. For those of you that have been on the last couple of calls, you guys have seen me around here in one role or another on these. I've been here at Colorado for about a year and a half, came from the University of Oklahoma previously. My first taste of sports post graduation was my marketing graduate assistantship. So I did a marketing GA at Auburn for 2 years, and that was kind of how I got my start in the industry.
Awesome. Do you have any advice you want to share real quick on how to approach it?
Yes, I did. So I would say on the whole topic of like me going to Auburn, I would say cast a wide net when you guys are getting started. I think when I was applying for jobs, I was born in Wisconsin. I grew up in Indiana, and the job offers I had coming out of school were Boise State, Georgia Tech, Auburn, and Southeast Missouri State, 4 places I never thought I would ever move to or live in ever, but those were the jobs, and I knew I wanted to kind of chase the dream. So I wrote down, you know, if you guys want to get your foot in the door, you need to be ready to go where the door is unlocked, wherever that may be, right? So it could take you to a really, really weird place. Just be open to that. You can be choosy on location once you've been in the industry for a couple of years, but it's so hard to break in. You got to break in at the start wherever you can.
Awesome. Thanks. Katie?
Hi, everybody. I'm Katie Johnson. I'm the Associate Director of Marketing at Florida. My previous stop was Washington State. And I kind of have like 2 post-student things. I was a full-time intern with a minor league baseball team here in Florida. And then I was a GA at Oklahoma, and I worked with Chris. My advice, I mean, I agree with Chris on like casting a wide net. Don't be afraid of stepping outside your comfort zone. I never thought I would live in Pullman, Washington, and I was there for 2.5 years. And I would just say, as Rick said, just make sure you're signing up for everything, or you're like volunteering. Like, that's how people remember your name.
Awesome. Thank you. So we are going to start our conversation. So tonight is focused around approaching the job search and summer internship. So I'm going to start with Chris, the first question. And Katie, if you have any thoughts, please jump in, vice versa. So we'll start with Chris. What do you look for in your prospect interns that are coming in for the prospective one?
Yeah, so I think when we're looking for prospective student interns, or when we're hiring marketing coordinators, graduate assistant, any entry level role, I think I really look for, traits. There's so much of this job is so unique, and a lot of it you have to learn by doing. So when you're hiring someone who's young, you're looking for those things that maybe aren't as teachable, right? Have a good attitude, be a hard worker, be that person that, volunteers for a lot, that shows up early, that's on time, that's detail oriented, like those kind of things that I think are difficult to teach. So when you find someone that has those qualities, like I can teach someone how to write a script, I can teach someone how to roll that t-shirt, how to run sound director at ClickFX, right? But I can't really teach someone to be accountable and to have a great attitude and be on time. So I think those are the qualities I really look for when I'm screening, is those things that aren't coachable, but those things that make you a great teammate and a great person that you want to pour into as a supervisor and a mentor.
Awesome. Thank you. Katie, do you have anything you want to add, or do you want to jump into the next one?
I think he said it all. Next one.
Awesome. And Gracia, I'm sure you'll pop in when you got some nuggets for us. So just unmute and come on in. But we'll continue with Katie. And it's funny, when I was prepping for this call, in one of the questions I said to Katie is, what were you looking for when you were searching for your first internship? And it's funny because my first full-time internship was at the University of Notre Dame. Again, like Katie and Chris, never thought I would move to the state of Indiana. Love Indiana, but just never thought I would. And the only reason I received a call from Notre Dame to interview was because I actually worked at Disneyland every summer when I was at home for college. So it's funny because that stood me apart. And I know Rick put that too, as like kind of to stand apart. So anyways, it just brought back crazy memories. So Katie, what were you looking for when searching for your first internship?
So my GA position, I was really looking for, honestly, I was kind of applying to a lot of GA positions at that point. I knew I wanted to stay in marketing, and I knew I wanted an experience that would help me grow more, because you can only learn so much as a student, and I just wanted something that would set my skills apart. One of my favorite things about my GA-ship at Oklahoma was that it really, I was in charge of wrestling, which is a sport we don't have down here in Florida. So it was definitely a new experience and a new opportunity, and I really enjoyed that. As far as with my summer intern, or like my internship with the minor league team, they really, in the minor league baseball, you kind of touch on everything that you possibly can. So I worked with sales, I worked with community relations, I did all the in-game stuff, and I think that really helped me be prepared for the workload that would come as a GA.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, Gracia, I'm throwing one at you. Somebody in the chat, I thought this was a great question and you answered it, but I think everyone should kind of hear it, is what is a good year to start doing summer internships?
Yeah, so I would say as soon as you can and are able to. Obviously everyone wants to enjoy their summer, so you don't have to start out full into an internship. My first internship I had in sports was for an independent baseball team, and I might have told the story on one of these calls before, but it was during the senior year after I graduated high school, going into college is when I did it. And just like Katie said, you get to do everything and you learn quickly what parts of sports you really want to do. And so when you're looking for that first opportunity, if you can get a wide range of experiences and responsibilities, I would definitely suggest that as you kind of grow into it and you go further along in your college career, and you start to understand what you want to do, that's when you kind of can focus in a little bit more specifically on what your experience is that you really need to go get that job that you want. So, it doesn't have to be, working 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, like minor league baseball. It could be over the summer, you're shadowing some folks that work at a team near where your home is. It can be you're volunteering on game days. Whatever you can. I was an intern selling chuck-a-pucks at a minor league hockey team. If you guys don't know what chuck-a-puck is, it's pretty fun. You get to throw a puck on the ice after the game, and if you land it in the circle in the middle, you win like the pot of money. So like I did that for a winter over a college break. So there's no right or wrong way to kind of go about it. Just try to meet as many people as you can.
Awesome. We had a question submitted ahead of time, and so it sort of ties in. So Chris, I'm going to throw this at you. Is it recommended, I know Grassi, you sort of touched on it, but is it recommended to gain experience within multiple departments of the industry rather than specializing in one, or staying focused in one?
Was that me, Chris, or Grassi, Chris?
You, sorry.
Okay.
You, Chris. We'll start with you.
We need like a number or something, I think.
I
So I think when you're starting out, when it's early, right? I think casting, figuring out what you want to do is important. Like I also did, I did 2 summers in minor league baseball, and it really helped me kind of affirm that marketing was my path, only because I did marketing and ticket sales. I had to be the mascot for a weekend. I had to run a concession stand for a weekend because a guy quit 2 hours before first pitch. I had worked in, I did a little bit of everything, right? And I was like, marketing was my favorite, even though I enjoyed all of it. So I think, when you're starting out, definitely do maybe try some different things. But I think as you progress further along in school, you probably want to narrow in a little bit, just because if you're bouncing around over and over and over again, all the way up to your senior year, you haven't really, and that's just my opinion, right? I would say kind of focus in a little bit, or kind of narrow it in as you get older and further on. But when you're just starting out, cast that wide net for sure.
Nicole, I'll actually add in,
Yep.
and they're kind of hitting on it indirectly, I would say. But figuring out what you want to do is obviously very important, but the more opportunities you get and the wider net you do cast, you're also going to figure out what you don't want to do. And that is just as important, in my opinion, when you're trying to figure out your next step, because you don't want to take a full-time job that in the end you really aren't excited about it or can't add value because it's just not something you're into. So I would definitely agree with everything that they're saying, and find out what you want to do, but also throughout that journey, find out what you don't want to do throughout the different opportunities you're gonna have.
Thank you, Nick. I do think that that's really important to hit on. And I also think as you continue to progress, you'll get responsibilities, and I have them now that I've never done. And I think being honest and open that you've never done that, and get people's advice who are in those chairs, is super important as well. So just kind of on both sides of it. Katie, question for you. Do you still have connections to those you interned with? And if so, how do you use them now?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it a little bit. I mean, obviously I still have connections with like Chris, Shane, and he was the assistant director when I was a GA. So I kind of just use my connections as like a sounding board sometimes to be like, hey, do you think this is a good idea? Or like if I was like in a job search and like wasn't sure what I wanted to do, I could always rely on those people to like give me good advice. They've been in those situations before. And also, especially when looking for that first job, it can be a little frustrating and daunting because the industry is so hard to break into. Having those people in your corner being like, no, it's fine, you're gonna get this, or the right one will come along, is really helpful. And knowing where to go once you get that job and what to do and stuff like that.
Katie, I'm going to stay with you. And question just came in, and I know you can kind of touch on it a little bit. I can touch on it as well. So what advice would you give on how to make the transition from a full-time, from like an internship to a full-time position at your same institution?
Yeah, so I didn't mention this earlier, but I actually did my undergrad at Florida. So now I'm back here which touches on a couple of things. Like I know Chris mentioned you can be more picky once you have a job in sports, which is kind of how that worked. I moved all the way across the country and then came back. And it's making that jump from intern to full-time is a little tricky because there's other people who you've worked with, there's other interns that maybe like now you oversee. And I think you kind of just have to have that mindset of like, not necessarily like, okay, this is what I'm doing now, but you have to say, I got this job for a reason and I'm not going to, you don't bully anyone or anything like that, but you have to do what you need to do. And the longer you're in it, I feel like the easier it is that people will listen to you, and the more you prove, you might have to prove yourself a little more, if that makes sense.
And I think to add on, and Grossi, Nick, or Chris, if you have anything to add, I went through it at Notre Dame. So I was an intern at the University of Notre Dame. And then one of our assistant directors left, and a year and a half later, I was promoted to an assistant director. And I think the hardest transition, and I don't know if I have the best advice, is that managing up, because those folks only see you as an intern. And I actually stayed at the University of Notre Dame for 7 years. So I was only an intern for a year and a half. And then I'm trying to like manage up to folks that looked at me as an intern. I went through an AD change, which I would recommend anyone going through an AD change. It is the most humbling, amazing, crazy ride you will ever go on. I will tell you that. But I think that that's something to always keep in mind too, is that some people will never look at you except in that intern role. And then you have to kind of continue to prove and work harder and harder and harder, but it does become successful. But just kind of keep that in mind when you are transitioning. But I do think it's a great time to transition. And I think it's a great place if you enjoy it and you're happy and successful and everything to continue to go, but just kind of keep that in mind. Anything else to add?
Nicole, I could touch upon something that was just brought up, job search coming out of grad school. When you're out there looking, Chris mentioned it, other Chris, not the OG Chris, mentioned that you got to be open to going anywhere, really, right? I ended up, my first full-time job after my graduate assistant position was in New Mexico at New Mexico State University. So like, I'm from New Hampshire. Half of the people in New Hampshire don't know where New Mexico is. Someone asked me if I needed my passport to move there. I said no. But like, that was the opportunity that I got, and it was amazing. And I loved every second of it because I got to do some really fun things out there. But you really have to cast a wide net. It's important to try to make as many connections, like genuine connections, as you can. Earlier on in the NACMA Academy, we talked about networking and building relationships. That is when all this comes into play. Calling up folks who you're connected with and seeing if they know anyone at places that are hiring. Reaching out on LinkedIn to people who are in those organizations that are hiring and introducing yourself, saying, hey, I just applied, just wanted to let you know I'm really excited about this. Here's some stuff that I've done in the past. Can't wait to be involved in the search process. So like, there's a lot you can do to get yourself out there and put yourself ahead of others. But you really have to be kind of open to where you're going to live, what the job title is. I've worked in places where I didn't want to sell sponsorship, but that was part of the job, and I wasn't going to turn down a job, and I went there and actually enjoyed it. And now when I'm working with the people that sell sponsorships, I know what it's like in their shoes. So don't let a job description that's not exactly what you're looking for turn you off on it. I think there's a lot of opportunity to grow, especially when you go out and get these kind of first opportunities in the business.
Chris, I'm going to throw a question at you from the chat. So how would you approach going about a job search coming out of grad school while also having some previous full-time work experience?
I froze. Can you repeat that, please?
Oh, sorry. I know you said you were freezing a little bit. Sorry. So how would you approach going about, this came from the chat, so I think it's important. How would you approach going about a job search coming out of grad school while also having some previous full-time work experience?
Again, I think that puts you in a good spot, right? Where you do having that previous work experience plus coming out of grad school, I think puts you at a bit of a leg up. So again, I'm not to beat the same drum over and over, but cast that wide net, right? Like look at a lot of places, be open to a lot of things like that. I think you're open to a lot of jobs, but it also, I don't know, that's a tough one, I would say. I think check the market, check all the job boards, and be ready to like talk about not just what you have in that prior work experience, but what you learned in grad school, because it is very different than coming out of school. So that gives you a unique thing that can make you memorable during that interview process, right? Like for me, someone applies for an entry-level job like that with us, it's going to show up and I'm going to remember that person if they call attention to it in a positive way and talk about, their grad school work, what they learned, plus their work experience. Cause I think you just have a different perspective on life, which can be really, really useful.
Thank you. Katie, I'm going to throw this one at you. It also is from the chat. And since you did a GA, what advice would you give someone who is looking to continue their career in college athletics as a GA, sort of going through the GA search process, etc.?
Yeah, so the GA search is it can be a little tedious because you're applying for grad school plus you're applying for jobs. So I would use the people at your school as a good resource to give you recommendations for grad school, as well as if they know anybody at the school you're applying to. A lot of times, like if I know someone's applying to a GA position, like I still know people at Oklahoma, if they're applying to a GA there, I'll just reach out and be like, hey, I have this person applying. They're really great. And that is going to set you aside or ahead of other people. So definitely use your connections, and like, I'm going to harp on it again, is casting a wide net. I think the best way somebody had it explained it to me when I was in undergrad was like, if you're expecting to only get a job like in the state you're in, your circle is like that wide. But if you cast the net to the whole country, your job circle is like that wide. So you're just going to have that many more opportunities. And also don't get discouraged is the best advice I have.
Anyone else to jump in with GAs? I know I was not a GA. I was just an intern, but I know be careful and know kind of the regulations to actually get into school, because I have had friends that have not been able to get into school, have a GA, but can't get into school, vice versa, get into school, can't be a GA. And some of them are a lot easier. So I think just being upfront and honest with the hiring manager through the process is super, super important with GAs, because they are very different than interns since you do go to school. So I don't know if anybody else has that advice, but I do know that it's kind of caught some folks at times and they couldn't accept the GA. So just be careful with that.
I can say real quickly, when I got the GA position at Oklahoma, they kind of got their GAs approved late. So me having already been accepted to school at Oklahoma had really helped me get into that position easily.
Chris, this one also was submitted by a guest ahead of time. So just wanted to touch on, when do positions generally start to become available to be accepted after graduation? Most jobs that this person has seen, they want you to start immediately. So kind of what's that sweet spot? Is there one? Any advice on that?
Yeah, I would say it's coming soon, right? So the way this was explained to me when I was coming out, if you think about the people that are hiring, right? It's people like Chris, Nicole, myself, Katie, right? So we're busy getting our basketball seasons kind of over the line right now. Once like regular season basketball ends and the NCAA tournament starts, that's when the job season traditionally starts, because that's when those hiring managers that are maybe running those sports or that are worried about those sports and above have time to start reviewing resumes, right? They have time to start doing job postings. So think like mid-March, late March, and then all the way through like July is kind of what I would consider hiring season or like free agency in college sports. Pro is very different, right? But if you think pros maybe more your thing, look at the off season, right? People are busy during the season for an NFL team or an NHL team or whatever. So they're going to hire in the off season. For college, that late spring is more not off season, but it's more when the people that are doing the hiring and make those decisions have time to adequately dedicate to that process. So like a month from now, I would expect a lot of jobs to start opening up that would maybe be of interest to a lot of you guys here.
And to kind of keep on that, I know somebody asked in the chat, Grassi, I'm going to throw this at you. Would you consider going to grad school necessary?
No, I would not. I just put in the chat too. We had this conversation during COVID when we did kind of a similar program. And so that was a really good conversation with some people that have been in grad school, some that weren't, some that got their MBAs, some that just got their master's degree. To me, when I'm looking at resumes, I'm looking at experience first, not education. Unless your education says like, and we talked about this in the resume call, unless your education says like you got like a 2.0 or below, I just look for the fact that you're you're in college or in school or graduated and you did it without failing. So I look for someone that kind of knows the ropes a little bit and has been involved in relevant experience, and that's how I look to hire people. Going to grad school, if you can't get a GA job, is really expensive. And I know that undergrad is really expensive. And so I don't hold it against anybody who hasn't gone to grad school. I think half of my staff here at Penn State has gone to grad school, half hasn't. My grad school was the easiest thing I've ever done in my life. So it really doesn't mean much. Like I'm not, Florida State grad school's gotten much better since I left. So don't judge anyone that went to Florida State grad school. But when I was there, it was super easy. But like it really is the experience you have and the people you know.
Awesome. And I would sort of agree. I do have my master's as well. Like Chris, I was just able to get it paid for while I was at Notre Dame. So I would also look at those avenues too. I don't think panic. I do think it's important to get it. It's just try and get it for free or for a very reduced cost if you can. But I would definitely check out that video that Chris put in the chat. That YouTube conversation I think is super. I was impressed by it. So I just wanted you to answer that, Chris. I appreciate it. Katie, this one for you. So how did your experience, you talked about minor league baseball, and I think a lot of folks go that direction, especially in the summer. How do you think your experience in minor league baseball has shaped who you are now?
I think working in minor league baseball taught me a lot about what I did and didn't want to do. Also, I think minor league baseball is a great, not only full-time position, but summer intern position, because like, there's minor league baseball teams everywhere. You can probably find one that's relatively close to your hometown, and like that way you don't have to like go out of pay for a room and board and stuff like that. It's also, as everybody's touched on, you wear so many hats. So you get to experience what it's like to put on a mascot costume, or like what it's like to pull the tarp. And so like you can see, first of all, if you want to be like fan facing or if you want to be more on the business side, and that's a very important like mindset to be in. And then from there, kind of narrowing it down, like, oh, maybe I do want to work in professional sports as opposed to college athletics where I'm in one sport all year round. Or I really like the marketing part of this job, but I don't necessarily like the sales part of this job. So like, it's kind of finding that balance and that fine line that really helped me in minor league baseball. And it definitely taught me some things I didn't want to do, and maybe some things that I wanted to try in the future.
Awesome. Chris, I'm going to throw another chat question. I appreciate all the chat questions. It's been really beneficial. Hopefully you guys are getting some stuff out of it. So somebody asked, when hiring for a GA position and first-time full-time positions, how do you consider experience outside of sports, such as undergraduate research, internships outside of sports, in addition to experience within the field?
So it's a lot of stuff's how you present it, right? When you're doing interviewing, if you say you don't have a ton of that experience, like within sports, you just need to be the one to help me as the interviewer make that mental connection, right? So like for instance, like when we hire undergrad interns, like I really like kids that have worked in fast food or like retail service, like someone worked at like Kohl's or like Dunkin' Donuts or whatever. I love that, right? Because I know you have customer service and that's transferable. So it's doing that same thing where you have to figure out, what from that not sports internship, research project, whatever it was, how you can relate something that you learned or did in that to something that is in the job description or that we need. And then it's very applicable, right? If it's like super out of left field, like I probably wouldn't bring it up, but just finding that connection and helping the interviewer or the interview committee make that mental leap of, oh, he or she did this. I can see how that would help him or her in this role here. Then it's perfect. Definitely do it. It's just a little more work on your part, but beneficial. You just got to do that legwork and really help them make that connection and that understanding.
Katie, I know that Chris answered this in the chat, but I know that you are a hiring manager. So somebody asked, when is the job search season? Like, I know we started to talk about it, but when does, for example, Florida, maybe Grassi, if you want to jump in, do most schools start the process of hiring during summer? Do all schools have summer interns? Kind of how, as they are looking, what are your guys' advices in that area? So Katie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so we have summer students that work for us. They do get paid over the summer, I believe. And we probably start that search more in April, but they are just our normal undergraduate students. I'm saying if you're looking for like a GA position, that time as soon as like basketball season ends, March to like June is the ideal GA season, because a lot of schools will shut down admissions starting like in early June. So if you can't get into the school, you can't be a GA. So a lot of GA positions open in like March, June, July, like that area. And then full-time positions, I'd say the summer is like the best time for that, is looking for full-time positions, maybe even into May. Some people have like baseball that they might have to deal with, but if they're like if they oversee basketball, they're going to start hiring as soon as basketball season's over.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In the next 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to see a lot of jobs come open in college athletics. And those are going to be GA positions. They're going to be internships. They're going to be full-time positions. For working at your school, the earlier you could get in touch with someone in the athletic department, the better. Right now it's late February. We're probably getting close to filling up any spots we have over the summer for interns, and we're already looking at the fall. So as early as you can meet people, even if you're not planning to apply to be an intern that semester, that summer, that you're doing it next year, meet people now and get your name out there. Let your intentions to work in the industry be known early on, and just keep following up and keeping in touch and building that relationship. So, there's really, it's funny because whenever like a new job pops up, where it's always like, oh, this is the worst time to be hiring, or there's never a best time to be hiring really in our industry, because we're always doing something. So whenever you see something that interests you, apply for it. And as you get to graduation, I don't know how many seniors we have, but don't let the fact that they want someone to start in April or May and you don't graduate until June discourage you from applying for that position. Because if you're someone who they're going to want, they'll wait for you for that. And so I would not be discouraged. I would make sure you're out there as much as possible.
Quick aside on what Chris said about that. I think a lot of times when you're getting started in your career, you look at the job description when you're applying somewhere, and you may talk yourself out of applying to a job because you think you don't meet every single little thing they want. As someone who has hired multiple times in Colorado, I can tell you guys, I do not go into a job search expecting to find a candidate to hit every single qualification, right? That's like your ideal candidate, but you understand that when you hire, you're going to have to do some training and some development, right? So if you don't stress yourself out if you don't feel like Photoshop really well and they want you to know that. If you have 8 or 9 other things that they want, they're going to want to talk to you and you're going to be a really good candidate. So don't talk yourself out of an opportunity before you've even started the process on it.
I'd also say start dates are slightly negotiable, especially if they're hiring in that March, April, May range. You're probably not going to have sport responsibilities until the fall. So if you can't come until after school's finished, and especially in a post-COVID world, you can start remote or you can just start a little later, I think.
So Chris, are there certain elements on a resume that catch your eye when hiring? And if so, what are those?
I like numbers. I think Brian from Work in Sports said that on the last time. I really enjoy numbers on resumes. It doesn't have to be a lot. And it doesn't necessarily have to be stuff you did all yourself, right? If it's something you helped with and you were an intern, ask your bosses for those numbers, right? If you helped, you were the lead, I was the lead soccer intern at Purdue. I worked hard. I helped set an attendance record there. I didn't do, all that work. I was the lead intern. I helped, right? But I asked for that exact number so I could put that on my resume and say, like, I helped set an attendance record as a lead intern. So I really like numbers. I like technical skills personally for me. If you are even passable at an Adobe program, Sound Director, Click Effects, any of these programs that you can use, I really like seeing that. Things on the other end, I don't like seeing. Don't put an objective on a resume. Your objective is to get a job. That's pretty clear. You don't need that space. Put another 2-3 lines of some cool stuff you did when you were an intern or a coordinator or a GA. That's more important. And for me, be detailed. I'll say everyone's very different with resumes, but for me, when I'm looking for someone, I want to know very clearly everything you know how to do and that you can do, right? Or as much as you can fit on a resume, right? Don't make me guess. Does she know how to do this? Does he have experience doing this? If you can fit it, put it on there so I have a clear scope of your abilities.
So I know we're kind of approaching the hour. So just kind of one wrap up question, and I'm going to start with Grossi, but if anybody else has any questions, throw them in the chat quickly and we'll try and get to them before we end. So Grossi, how would you suggest maintaining relationships post-internship?
Great question, because I don't think enough people do this well. You go to an internship, you do a great job, you go off and get your full-time job or your next, or you go back to school and you don't check back in. Those people that you met in your internship are going to be people that you could possibly use as references and connections for your whole career. There are people who I interned with in undergrad, which was like almost 20 years ago, which is very scary, who are still in this business and I still speak to. So following up, once a month, shooting them an email, letting them know what you're up to, what you've worked on. If you see something really fun that they've done at their job, at their school, with their team, commenting on that, sending a text message, like really don't hesitate or feel like you are intruding on people. If you just reach out. Like we want to hear from our old interns. We want to hear from people that we work with. We want to know that they're doing well. So don't feel like you're burdening anybody on that. I think it's really important to continue to build those relationships after you have time together.
Chris, Katie, Nick, any?
I'll chime in here. So I went to undergrad at Ohio State. Don't have my master's, so
Ooh.
So I don't think that is necessary, but that's a side point. So while I was at Ohio State, one of my supervisors was a previous NACMA intern. So she kind of steered me on this path to become a NACMA intern, which was awesome, which I did 7-8 years ago now. And then a different supervisor while I was at Ohio State, in the time I went to NACMA, he went to the NCAA in Indianapolis. So I just kind of stayed in touch with him, not thinking anything of it as far as a job would go down the road, but just stayed in touch, checked in, let him know how I was doing at NACMA for that 1 year. He went over there. Towards the end of the internship, he said, "Hey, my assistant position's opening up. I think you'd enjoy it. I think you'd be good at it, so you should apply." So ultimately, by keeping that connection open, I got my first full-time job at the NCAA, where I was for 5.5, 6 years. Luckily, I'm from the Cleveland area, so NACMA is located in Cleveland. So after I left NACMA and was at the NCAA, when I would come home every now and then, I'd check back in with the NACMA full-time staff, would come back to the office, have lunch with them, not every time, but every now and again. And then ultimately, this about a year ago, in January, I guess it was, a couple of the folks came down to Indianapolis for the college football playoff national championship game. They needed help. This is while I was still at the NCAA. They needed help with an event that they were running. So I just went over there, helped check people in. And while I was there, the one guy was like, so if we ever have an opening, like, are you interested in coming back to work at NACMA? So ultimately he didn't know at the time, but 3 months later, someone was leaving and I was at the top of their list to call to see if I was interested, and obviously interviewed, and now have been there almost for a full-time position for almost a full year. So definitely a good question, and stay in touch with not only the people that you interned with, which I also do. I had Tangela Cheatham at Central Florida was actually one of the presenters on the last call, and her and I interned together at NACMA, so we still keep in touch. But yeah, definitely, as Chris said, people like to hear from their former interns, see how they're doing. So definitely keep in touch and keep those connections strong.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say, as like, I'm a very introverted person, so learning to keep in touch with people was pretty difficult for me. But I think that was something I really had to intentionally try to do. And sometimes you do just have like better relationship with people, so it's easier to stay in touch with them. But even if it's something like, if you see that they got a new job, it's something as simple as like sending them an email that's, hey, congrats, like, happy for you. Like, even something as simple as that is you staying in touch with them and letting them know that you're there and you see them.
Yeah, I would say you don't have to really overthink it when you're keeping in touch with people. I think, like, hey, like, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. That's an easy in, right? I think for a lot of people that I used to work with or work for, it's a lot of, quote, shop talk, right? Like, I'll see something that Katie does at Florida and I'll just be, I maybe haven't talked to her in a month or two, be like, hey, how did you guys, do this? Like, how did that happen? Or vice versa. A lot of my old GAs or interns will have like a professional question. They're like, hey, like, I don't know how to do this, or I'm struggling on how to write this PA or fit this promotion in or something like that. Can you help me? And I go, yeah, sure. And then it kind of spirals into, hey, how are you doing? So a lot of times it can be as easy as that, where it's just a quick question, or you saw, someone did something cool, ask them about it, say, hey, congrats on the win. They make the Sweet 16. If their school's on a Cinderella run, it can be as easy as that. So.
Awesome. I don't think we have any more questions in the chat, so we can kind of wrap it up. So thank you to Chris and Katie and Rick. That was awesome. Thank you to Grassi for stepping in and kind of chiming in there. We appreciate all of you for joining us. We know it's not easy to take time, so we do appreciate it. We know it's a super busy time of year. Some few little things, make it a habit to check the NACMA job board. So I think Nick might have thrown some stuff in there and Grassi, but NCAA Marketplace, NACMA job board, Teamworks Online, College Sports Connect. There are a ton of opportunities out there to find jobs. So if you need them, please let us know. We're happy to help you. But like Rick George said, never burn bridges, leave place better than you found. Stay focused on your current role, and outwork everyone is super important. So we hope you're able to join us next month. So due to March Madness, we're going to adjust the schedule. So just a heads up, the next session is March 21st. So it's a Tuesday. We'll do 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to focus on job interviews, what to expect, how to prepare. Again, if you guys have questions ahead of time, please email Chris Grassi or myself, and we definitely can throw those in. We want to make this as beneficial to you guys as possible, so we love the interaction. So all the best during crossover season. We know it's hard, so stay focused, and also all the best to those who have teams competing in winter championships. So good luck and thank you. And if you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. So hope you guys have a great night.
Thank you, guys.